They called her too ugly to marry. Then he removed the sack, and his heart stopped. The burlap sack came off, and Carter Thorne's heart stopped dead in his chest. They'd called his mail-order bride too ugly to marry. Too big, too wrong, too much woman for any man to want. 6 men had removed that sack before him. 6 men had walked away. Carter stared up at her, this giant of a woman towering 9 inches above him, and his cane slipped from his shaking hand. The crowd erupted in laughter, cruel, cutting, the kind of laughter that follows you into your nightmares. "Lord have mercy! The cripple got himself a monster," someone shouted, but Carter couldn't hear them, couldn't move, couldn't breathe, because the woman standing before him, with her blacksmith's shoulders and storm-grey eyes brimming with tears, wasn't what they'd said at all. She was magnificent. Her voice came out broken, defeated. "I'll get back on the train." Carter opened his mouth, but no words came. His chest felt like it was caving in, like his ribs were cracking open, like everything he'd believed about himself, about what he deserved, about what love could look like, was shattering right there on that platform. Then a shadow fell over them both. Magnus Pritchard, 6'5", 280 pounds of pure cruelty, the richest, most dangerous rancher in Wyoming territory. He pushed through the crowd, his eyes locked on Carter's bride, and smiled like a wolf that just found wounded prey. "Thorne," he said softly, "I'll give you double what you paid, right now." And the way he looked at her, like she was a prize, like she was his, made Carter's blood turn to ice. Because suddenly, this wasn't about a mail-order bride anymore. This was about whether a small, broken man could protect the one thing he'd been praying for his entire life. Carter bent down, picked up his cane with trembling fingers, and forced himself to stand straight. His bad leg screamed in protest, but he didn't let it show. He looked up at Magnus Pritchard, this mountain of a man who'd spent the last 3 years making his life hell, trying to steal his water rights, his land, everything he'd built. "She's not for sale," Carter said quietly. Magnus laughed. The crowd laughed with him. The sound rolled across the platform like thunder. "Boy, look at her. Look at you." Magnus stepped closer, his boots heavy on the wood. "You think you can handle a woman like that?" "You can barely handle a strong wind." Carter's face burned. His hand tightened on his cane until his knuckles went white. Because Magnus was right. Everyone knew it. Carter Thorne was 5'6", weighed maybe 140 pounds soaking wet, and walked with a limp that got worse when it rained. He was the town joke. The engineer everyone respected, but no one took seriously. Too small, too weak, too broken to be a real man. The woman, his bride, Adelaide they'd called her, stood frozen beside him. Her massive hands were clenched at her sides. Her jaw was tight, and in her eyes, Carter saw something that made his chest ache. She expected him to take the offer, expected him to sell her off like cattle, expected him to prove that he was just like all the others. Carter turned to her, had to crane his neck back to meet her eyes. "Miss Adelaide Keene, is it?" She nodded once, stiff, guarded. "My name is Carter Thorne. I'm an engineer. I design water systems, and I build things that last." His voice was steady now, clear. "I sent for a mail-order bride because every woman in 3 counties has made it very clear that a man my size isn't worth their time. I'm told I'm not much to look at and even less to boast about." Her eyes flickered with something. Confusion, maybe, or recognition. "But I made you a promise when I paid for your passage," Carter continued. "I promised to give you a home, to treat you with respect, to honor you as my wife." He paused. "And I don't break my promises." The crowd had gone quiet. Even Magnus had stopped smiling. Adelaide's throat worked. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Carter held out his hand to her. It looked like a child's hand next to hers. Small, fragile, pathetic. "Because if I don't keep my word to you right now, in front of all these people, then I'm not the man I claim to be. And I'd rather die than be that kind of man." Something cracked in Adelaide's expression. Her eyes went bright and wet. She stared at his outstretched hand like it was a miracle, like it was a trap, like she couldn't decide which. "Take my hand, Adelaide," Carter said softly. "Please." She looked at Magnus. At the crowd, at the train behind her that could carry her back to Philadelphia, back to her father's forge, back to a life where at least she knew what kind of disappointment she was. Then she looked down at Carter Thorne, this tiny, fierce man with kind eyes and a backbone made of iron. And she did something she hadn't done in 5 years. She smiled. Her hand, rough and scarred from years at the forge, closed around his. It swallowed his fingers completely. She had to bend down, way down, to whisper near his ear, "Are you sure?" Her voice cracked. "Everyone will laugh at you." Carter squeezed her hand. "Let them." He turned to face Magnus Pritchard, still holding Adelaide's hand, and his voice rang out across that platform loud and clear. "This is my wife, and if you or anyone else has a problem with that, you can take it up with me." Magnus's face went dark. "Dangerous. You're making a mistake." "Thorne, maybe." Carter smiled for the first time since the sack came off. "But she's my mistake to make." The train whistle blew. People started moving again, gathering bags, loading wagons. The show was over, but Magnus didn't move. He stood there, staring at Adelaide like a man staring at something that should have been his, and Carter felt a cold spike of fear drive into his gut, because he knew Magnus Pritchard, knew how he operated, and men like Magnus didn't lose. They waited, they planned, they took what they wanted when you weren't looking. Carter helped Adelaide onto his wagon, had to bite back a laugh at how the whole thing dipped under her weight, and climbed up beside her. She took up 3/4 of the bench. He looked like a child sitting next to her. The crowd was still watching, still whispering, still laughing behind their hands. Carter picked up the reins, clicked his tongue, and the horses started forward. They rode in silence through Copper Creek Valley, past the general store, the saloon, the church with its white steeple pointing up at the endless blue Wyoming sky. Adelaide sat rigid, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed straight ahead. Finally, after about 20 minutes, she spoke. "Why?" Carter glanced at her. "Why what? Why didn't you take his offer?" Her voice was flat, careful. "He would have paid you double. You could have gotten someone else, someone smaller." Carter finished. She flinched. Carter pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of his property. Ahead of them, his ranch stretched out across the valley, the house he'd built with his own hands sitting at the center like a promise. Behind the house, the creek he'd spent 3 years engineering flowed clear and strong, feeding irrigation channels that turned drought-cursed land into something green and alive. "Adelaide," he said quietly, "do you know what people have been telling me my whole life?" She shook her head. "That I'm too small, that I'll never be strong enough, that I can't do the things real men do." He turned to face her fully. "They said I couldn't build this ranch, that a man my size couldn't survive out here, that I'd fail." His hand tightened on the reins, "But I didn't fail. I succeeded, not because I was big or strong, but because I was smart, because I worked harder than everyone else, because I refused to let their words define what I could be." He met her eyes. "So when I saw you standing there, with everyone laughing, with Magnus Pritchard trying to buy you like property, I saw something they didn't see." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I saw myself." Adelaide's breath hitched. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "You're not too big, Adelaide. You're not too much. You're exactly who you're supposed to be. And anyone who can't see that is blind." She turned away, shoulders shaking. Carter wanted to reach out, to touch her arm, to offer comfort, but he didn't. He just sat there, giving her space to feel what she needed to feel. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "No one has ever said anything like that to me before." "Then they were fools," she laughed, broken and wet, and wiped her face with the back of her enormous hand. "You don't even know me." "Not yet," Carter agreed. He clicked to the horses and the wagon started moving again. "But I'd like to." The house was bigger than Adelaide expected. 2 stories, painted white, with a porch that wrapped around the front and side, real glass in the windows, a stone chimney rising up through the roof. This wasn't some thrown-together cabin. This was a home. Carter climbed down from the wagon, his movements careful because of the leg, and reached up to help her. Adelaide hesitated. She'd learned a long time ago that accepting help usually came with a price. But something in Carter's patient expression made her take his hand anyway, the moment her boots hit the ground. The front door burst open. A girl came flying out, maybe 12 years old, all knees and elbows, and wild dark hair streaming behind her like a banner. She launched herself at Carter, who caught her with a laugh that transformed his whole face. "Uncle Carter! You're back! You're back!" The girl was practically vibrating with excitement. "Did you bring her? Is she here? Can I meet her?" "Lucy, slow down." Carter set her back on her feet, steadying himself with his cane. "Yes, she's here, and you need to mind your manners." Lucy spun around and her eyes went huge. Her mouth fell open. She had to tilt her head all the way back just to see Adelaide's face. "Holy Moses," Lucy whispered. "You're enormous." "Lucy." Carter's voice cracked like a whip, but Adelaide just smiled, sad and knowing. "It's all right. I know what I am." "No, you don't understand." Lucy stepped closer, circling Adelaide like she was examining a statue in a museum. "You're enormous, like a hero, like the lady knights in my storybooks, like Brunhild or Joan of Arc or—" "Lucy reads a lot," Carter said dryly. "Can you actually fight?" Lucy's eyes were shining now. "Have you ever punched someone? Could you beat up Tommy Richardson? He's been stealing my lunch every day, and Uncle Carter says I have to solve my own problems, but Tommy's twice my size and—" "Lucy, breathe." Carter put a hand on his niece's shoulder. "This is Miss Adelaide Keene. She's going to be staying with us. As my wife." Lucy's jaw dropped again. "You got married? Without me there?" "Not yet. The wedding's in 3 days." Carter looked at Adelaide. "If you still want to go through with it." The question hung in the air between them. Adelaide could feel Lucy watching her, could feel Carter trying not to look desperate, could feel the weight of this decision pressing down on her shoulders like a blacksmith's hammer. She'd come to Wyoming territory because she had nowhere else to go. 6 rejections. 6 men who'd taken one look at her and decided she wasn't worth their time. She'd expected the 7th to do the same, but Carter Thorne had looked at her like she was magnificent, and this little girl was looking at her like she was a hero. "I want to," Adelaide heard herself say. "I want to go through with it." Lucy let out a shriek of joy that probably scared birds 3 counties over and grabbed Adelaide's hand. "Come on, I'll show you everything. We have chickens and a garden, and Uncle Carter built a workshop where he makes all his inventions, and there's a creek where we can swim in the summer, and—" She dragged Adelaide toward the house, chattering the whole way. Carter followed behind, slower, his cane tapping against the hard-packed earth. Adelaide glanced back at him once and caught him smiling. Inside, the house smelled like fresh bread and sawdust, and something sweet she couldn't identify. The furniture was simple but beautiful, every piece clearly handmade with the kind of precision that spoke of real skill. The floors were wood, polished smooth, with rugs in deep reds and blues. And everywhere there were books. Shelves lined every wall, stuffed with more books than Adelaide had ever seen outside a library. "Uncle Carter loves books," Lucy explained. "He says they're proof that being small doesn't mean you can't reach high places." Adelaide turned to look at Carter, who'd settled into a chair by the fireplace. He shrugged, a little embarrassed. "Your room is upstairs," he said quietly. "First door on the right. I'll sleep down here until we're actually married." Something warm unfurled in Adelaide's chest. He wasn't going to push, wasn't going to demand, was going to give her space to decide. Lucy tugged on her hand. "Come on, I'll show you." The room upstairs was small, but clean, with a bed that looked like it might actually be long enough for her, and a window that looked out over the valley. Adelaide's trunk was already there, carried up by Carter somehow, despite his size and his leg. She ran her hand over the quilt on the bed, soft, worn cotton, in a pattern of interlocking rings. "Uncle Carter's mother made that," Lucy said softly. "Before she died. He said you should have it because—" She bit her lip. "Because you deserve beautiful things." Adelaide's throat closed up. She sat down on the bed, which creaked but held, and put her face in her hands. Lucy sat beside her, small and warm and completely unafraid. "Are you sad?" "No." Adelaide's voice came out rough. "I'm just not used to people being kind. Well, you better get used to it fast because Uncle Carter is kind all the time. It's actually kind of annoying. Lucy bumped her shoulder against Adelaide's arm. But he's also the best person I know. When my parents died last year, nobody wanted me. I'm too wild and I talk too much and I get in trouble at school. But Uncle Carter said I could live with him forever if I wanted. He said wild things are just things that haven't found the right home yet. Adelaide looked down at this fierce little girl, with her tangled hair and dirt on her face and eyes that had seen too much loss too young. He sounds like a good man. He is. Lucy stood up, brushing off her skirt. That's why I'm going to make sure you don't hurt him. The sudden shift in tone caught Adelaide off guard. Lucy's face had gone serious, protective. She crossed her arms over her thin chest and stared up at Adelaide with an expression that would have been funny if it wasn't so earnest. Uncle Carter pretends he's strong, but he's not. Not on the outside. People hurt him all the time with their words. They make fun of his leg and his size, and they act like he's not a real man. Lucy's voice shook. But he is. He's more of a man than any of them. And if you came here thinking you could use him or laugh at him or make him feel small, You'll what? Adelaide asked gently. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. But I'll do something, because he deserves better. Adelaide slid off the bed and knelt down so she was eye level with this protective little lioness. Lucy, look at me. Lucy sniffed and met her eyes. I have been laughed at every single day of my life since I was 13 years old and grew taller than my father, Adelaide said quietly. I have been called a freak, a monster, an abomination. I have been rejected and mocked and hidden away like something shameful. So when your uncle looked at me today and called me magnificent, when he held my hand in front of all those people, even though they were laughing at him, when he chose me over money and reputation and common sense, her voice cracked. That was the first time in 10 years that anyone has made me feel like I might be worth something. A tear rolled down Lucy's cheek. So I promise you, on everything I hold sacred, I will never hurt him, Adelaide whispered, because he saved me today. And I don't know if I can ever repay that debt. Lucy threw her arms around Adelaide's neck and squeezed hard. Adelaide froze for a second, stunned, then slowly wrapped her arms around this small, fierce girl and held on. When they came back downstairs, Carter had dinner started. Venison stew simmering on the stove, filling the kitchen with rich, savory smells that made Adelaide's stomach growl. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eaten. Can you cook? Carter asked without looking up from the pot he was stirring. Yes, my mother taught me before she died. Good, because I can make about 4 things and Lucy's been complaining about all of them for months. I have not, Lucy protested. I just said that your biscuits taste like sawdust and your eggs taste like shoes. Carter raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do you know what shoes taste like? Lucy grinned and didn't answer. They ate at the kitchen table, the 3 of them, and it felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Adelaide kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Carter to say something cruel or demanding, for the kindness to reveal itself as a mask. But he just ate his stew and asked her questions about Philadelphia, about her father's forge, about what kinds of things she'd learned to make. When she told him she could shoe a horse, repair a wagon axle, and forge a knife that would hold its edge for years. His eyes lit up like she'd just told him she could fly. I have tools, he said quickly. In the workshop. Not a full forge, but I have an anvil and a bellows, and if you wanted to, I'd like that, Adelaide said. And meant it. After dinner, Carter excused himself to check on the horses. Lucy helped Adelaide clean up, chattering the whole time about school and her friends, and how Tommy Richardson was definitely going to get what was coming to him one of these days. When the dishes were done, Adelaide stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the valley, at the creek flowing silver in the moonlight, at the mountains rising up black and sharp against the stars. Carter came back in, stomping mud off his boots. He hung up his coat and his hat and turned to find her watching him. It's beautiful here, Adelaide said softly. It is. Carter moved to stand beside her, barely reaching her shoulder. Took me 3 years to get the water system working right. Everyone said it was impossible. Said the land was cursed, but I proved them wrong. You like proving people wrong. I like proving myself right. He smiled. There's a difference. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the night settle in around them. Carter, Adelaide said finally, why did you really send for a mail-order bride? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quiet and raw. Because I'm tired of being alone. Tired of eating dinner by myself. Tired of waking up in an empty house and wondering if this is all my life is ever going to be. He turned to look at her. And because I wanted to prove that someone could want me, that I wasn't so broken and small and useless that I'd die alone. Adelaide's chest ached. You're not useless. Tell that to every woman who's ever turned me down. He laughed, bitter and hurt. Tell that to Magnus Pritchard, who looks at me like I'm something he scraped off his boot. Tell that to the men in town who pat me on the head like I'm a child and then ask me to fix their equipment because that's all I'm good for. Carter, I'm sorry. He shook his head. You don't need to hear this. You've got your own burdens to carry. But Adelaide put her hand on his shoulder, and even through the fabric of his shirt, she could feel how small he was, how fragile, how much strength it must have taken to stand up to Magnus Pritchard today. To hold her hand in front of all those people, to choose her when he could have taken the money and tried again with someone smaller, prettier, easier. Thank you, she whispered. For today, for this, for giving me a chance when no one else would. Carter looked up at her, and in his eyes she saw the same desperate hope she felt burning in her own chest. The hope that maybe, just maybe, 2 broken people could build something whole. You don't have to thank me, Adelaide, he said softly. You just have to stay. 3 days passed, like a dream Adelaide was afraid to wake up from. She worked alongside Carter in the mornings, helping him repair irrigation channels and reinforce the water gates. He was brilliant with his hands, could look at a broken system and see exactly what it needed, and he never once made her feel like she was too much or taking up too much space. When she lifted a beam, he couldn't budge. He just grinned and said, well, that's convenient. Lucy followed them everywhere, a constant shadow full of questions and laughter. She taught Adelaide the names of all the chickens, showed her the best swimming spot in the creek, and made her promise to teach her how to throw a proper punch, just in case Tommy Richardson tries something, Lucy explained seriously. On the morning of the wedding, Adelaide woke up terrified. She stood in front of the small mirror in her room, trying to tame her hair into something presentable, and all she could see were her flaws. Too tall, too broad, too masculine. Her hands were scarred from the forge. Her face was too angular, too hard. What was Carter thinking, marrying someone like her? A soft knock on the door made her jump. Adelaide, Carter's voice came through, hesitant. Can I come in? She opened the door. He stood there in a clean white shirt and black vest, his hair combed back, looking nervous and young and impossibly small. You look beautiful, he said quietly. Adelaide laughed, bitter. I look like I should be shoeing your horse, not marrying you. No. Carter stepped inside and closed the door behind him. You look exactly like someone I want to spend my life with. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a ring, simple silver with a small blue stone. It was my mother's, he said. I know it might not fit, but I thought. Adelaide picked up the ring. It barely made it past her first knuckle. Her eyes stung. Carter, I can't. Then we'll get it resized, or I'll make you a new one. He took her enormous scarred hand in both of his. Adelaide, I need you to understand something. I'm not marrying you because I'm desperate. I'm marrying you because in 3 days you've made this house feel more like a home than it has in 10 years. She looked down at him. This tiny, fierce man with kind eyes and a heart big enough to hold all her broken pieces. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. He smiled. Let's be scared together. The wedding was small. Just them, Lucy, and Reverend Blackwell in the little church at the edge of town. Adelaide had to bend down so far to kiss Carter that Lucy giggled. But when their lips met, something clicked into place inside Adelaide's chest, something that felt like belonging. They walked out of that church as husband and wife, and Adelaide saw Magnus Pritchard watching from across the street. His face was dark with something dangerous. Carter saw him too. His hand tightened on hers. "He's not going to let this go," Adelaide said quietly. "I know." Carter's voice was steady. "But he'll have to go through both of us now." Magnus Pritchard came for them on a Tuesday. Carter was in town filing paperwork for his water rights when Magnus made his move. Adelaide was alone at the house with Lucy working in the garden when she heard horses, 6 of them, Magnus and 5 of his ranch hands, all armed, all smiling like they'd already won. "Afternoon, Mrs. Thorne," Magnus called out, tipping his hat with mock politeness. "That's quite a garden you got there. Shame if something happened to it." Adelaide stood slowly, dirt on her hands, her heart hammering. Lucy moved behind her, small and scared. "My husband will be back soon," Adelaide said, keeping her voice level. "Oh, I'm counting on it." Magnus dismounted, his boots heavy on the ground. "See, I've been thinking. Your husband has something I want, that water rights contract. And I think you're going to help me convince him to sell." He stepped closer. Too close. Adelaide could smell whiskey on his breath. "You made a mistake marrying that little cripple," Magnus said softly. "You need a real man, someone your size, someone who can actually protect you." Adelaide's hands clenched into fists. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to make herself small. But Lucy was behind her, and Carter was counting on her, and she was so damn tired of being afraid. "Get off my property," Adelaide said quietly. Magnus laughed, reached out to grab her arm. Adelaide's fist connected with his jaw, with a crack that echoed across the valley. Magnus went down like a felled tree, hitting the dirt hard. His men froze, shocked. Lucy let out a whoop of pure joy. Adelaide stood over Magnus Pritchard, this giant of a man, and her voice came out cold and clear. "I said get off my property. And if you ever threaten my family again, I'll do worse than knock you down. I'll bury you." That's when Carter's wagon came tearing up the road, dust flying. He jumped down before it even stopped, his face white with fear, and then he saw Magnus on the ground and Adelaide standing over him, and he understood. "You okay?" Carter asked, moving to her side. "I'm fine." Adelaide's hand was already swelling. "But I think we need to have a conversation with the sheriff." What Magnus didn't know was that Carter had friends. Reverend Blackwell testified about Magnus's threats. The sheriff found evidence of the fake deed Magnus had been planning to use. And when the judge asked Adelaide to tell her side of the story, she spoke with such quiet dignity that even the men who'd laughed at her wedding stood up and applauded. Magnus Pritchard lost everything. His reputation, his water rights claim, his power, and Carter Thorne gained something he'd never had before: respect. That night, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Adelaide leaned down and kissed her husband's forehead. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me when no one else would." Carter took a huge, scarred hand in his small one and smiled. "Thank you for showing me that strength comes in all sizes." Lucy came running out, muddy and wild as always. "Uncle Carter, Adelaide, Tommy Richardson said he's sorry and he won't steal my lunch anymore." They laughed, the 3 of them, their voices carrying across the valley as the stars came out one by one. 2 people who'd been told they were too much and not enough had found each other, and together they'd built something beautiful, because love isn't about fitting into someone else's expectations. It's about finding someone who sees you exactly as you are and says, "Yes, you're exactly what I've been looking for," and that's the most powerful thing in the world. So here's a question for you. Have you ever been told you're too much or not enough? Have you ever felt like you don't fit into the boxes people try to put you in? Drop a comment below and tell us your story. Let us know where you're watching from. And if this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of love, courage, and people who refuse to be anything less than exactly who they were meant to be, because your story matters. And we can't wait to hear it.